I don't know about you guys, but I'm a big fan of creepy stories about the ocean and the creatures that live inside it, like the deep ones from A Tale of Ice and Fire, or Naga and Murlocs from World of Warcraft. And yes, before you guys say anything, I do know that they are heavily inspired and essentially based on the deep ones from H.P. Lovecraft's stories. The concept of dangerous and unknown creatures attacking coastal towns and having people that worship them as deities and gods is such a cool concept in my mind, and I'm going to give it my own twist and include it in my game. So the first way I'm going to be introducing these creatures into my world is through a dungeon theme that is based on them. My idea is that these will be ancient ruins and temples that are dotted along the coastline, whose purpose has been forgotten by a majority of people in my world. Their history and purpose is a mystery that the player might rediscover by delving through these dungeons. So, where do we start? I know I want these places to be ancient and foreboding, but also to have some sort of aquatic theming to link them back to their purpose and the people who used to occupy them. With that knowledge, I started putting together the basic modular pieces like walls, ceilings, pillars, and floors. I started to also think that these places might be quite wet and damp and also have seaweed and moss inside of them due to the ocean finding its way into the dilapidated ruins. To represent this, I added some leakage marks dripping down the walls, and I also added some barnacles growing on some of the surfaces to basically imply the fact that maybe these places were either partially or fully submerged at some point in their history. Something I definitely wanted to include was runic symbols throughout my dungeon from a long forgotten eldritch language. So to do this, I made some custom glyphs that I could add to my assets. I also wanted to add items that were ornamental or perhaps had some sort of religious significance to the original inhabitants of these ruins. So I created an altar for ceremonies that may have been held here in the past and may now be used by new cultists and the remaining denizens of these places. Along with this, I also created totems with tendrils wrapping around them, grasping huge pearls. I began putting the first dungeon together with the pieces I'd created so far, and decided to add blue and green lighting to it. The blue lighting was emanating from wall lights throughout the ruins that I created based on anglerfish, which I thought was a fun idea. And the green lights are being emitted from candles and torches that have been introduced to this environment by its new occupants and the cultists that now call it home. These are places that are intrinsically linked to the sea and the creatures that lurk within it. And so I wanted to create a cave system that could connect the ruins to the ocean. In order to do this, I needed to make a modular set of cave tiles. Thankfully, this turned out to be way easier than I expected. I made the standard walls, curved walls, floors, and pillars, but I didn't have to be so worried about being uniform and perfect, because caves have much more natural shapes than something man-made, and I didn't have to worry about everything perfectly fitting together at right angles. Now I can put together a cave system which connects to the ruins, which runs deeper down into the dungeon. I then created this underground lake, which I imagined would be a central point of interest where rituals and ceremonies could take place, and maybe even a boss fight for the player when they get to the end. Whilst doing all of this, I also added areas where daylight might be finding its way into the cabins. I also wanted to include places where water is coming through the cracks in the ruins, and rocks, by adding some waterfalls and dripping. Lastly, I created some pottery that can be placed throughout the dungeon. I will also be making more variations of these items and ornaments like it, but this one is special because it contains the oil used to keep the torches throughout the dungeon lit. The player can break these open, covering the area around it in oil. I'm currently working on the player being able to then ignite these areas with fire using something like a torch, a fire arrow, or a flame-based spell, because I want to add more ways for the player to actually interact with the space around them. Along with this, I'm working on traps, puzzles, and different ways for the player to use their environment against their enemies. If you watched my first video and are wondering what happened to the dungeon type that I was working on in it, I haven't forgotten about it. I just prefer to rotate between different aspects of the game, because as I work, I learn new things and get better at what I do. So if I focused on just one modular set and got it done completely before working on something else, it might look very outdated compared to the newer ones I make by the time the game is finished. So this way, I balance out my time and my current skill level across all of the work that I'm doing. This way, everything looks like it belongs together. I hope you enjoyed this early preview of my Deep Ones inspired dungeon. I'll be making videos in the future showing any updates and additions that I make for it, because I still have a lot of plans to share with you guys. As of this video releasing, I'm still working on additions to this dungeon. Thanks so much for watching, and please feel free to subscribe if you want to keep up to date with me and the work that I'm doing. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and with that said, I'll see you in the next video. At linked the ruins to... Nothing. I work, I learn new things, and get better at what I... Get better